First thing I learned in civics, and this is what I took home in 12th grade, and by the way, there's a possibility that I think at least one or two generations skip civics of what I've seen over the last year or so, or 2 or 3 or 4 years. But the one thing I learned in civics was this that I took home, that the First Amendment right is not only your right to participate in civil disobedience, it is your obligation. Thank you. Thank you for being out here today. I'm Chris Gibbs. I'm just a farmer from Shelby County. We own and operate about 600 acres, traditional corn, soybeans, wheat, and I've got 80 cows, beef cows, so we're getting ready to calve. And I'm up here today to talk about rural America, to talk about what's happening with this administration and how it adversely affects farmers like myself and rural America and rural communities. But I first want to give you a little bit of a disclaimer. I have a sordid past. I was in the Republican Party and administration for about 20 years. I was chair of the Shelby County, Ohio Republican Party for about 7 years. I left the Republican Party in 18 and 19, ended up in the Democratic Party, ended up as chair of the Democratic Party in Shelby County, and I am where I need to be. I am where I'm going to remain. I am where I'm going to die, right here with the Democratic Party, because I wanted to be part of a party that looks for solutions for people and not retribution and revenge against individuals. And so thank you for being here. Let me go back in time just a little bit and talk about rural America, to talk about tariffs. In 2018, two things that stuck out in my view that caused me to leave the Republican Party, that I believed stood for statesmanship, diplomacy, and personal responsibility. All of those things are gone. They're just gone. They do not exist in today's MAGA party. In 2018, then President Trump applied punitive tariffs to all of our traditional trading partners. You got to remember this. This was a big deal at the time, particularly for rural America. The EU, Mexico, Canada, right on down the line, all of those trading partners, and China. China's another story. But he applied those tariffs in a punitive basis just because he could. Okay? And what happened? Every one of those countries then retaliated against our United States of America's soft underbelly. And what is our soft underbelly? It's agriculture. All of the products that we send to other countries, okay, were tariffed in retaliation. I lost, and all farmers like me lost 20% of the value of our soybean crop overnight, which then made Trump do this. He raided the Treasury to pay myself and all farmers across the United States $28 billion to keep our mouth shut. And it worked for farmers, but it didn't work for me. I spoke out, and I said, I did an op-ed in my local media. I was so damn mad, and I wrote a riddle in there, and I said this. I said, I slept with a billionaire because he said he loved me. When I got up in the morning, I found out that all I got was screwed. When I went to tell the world about it, he offered me money to keep my mouth shut. Who am I? No, I'm not a porn star. I'm the American farmer. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. And that's not all. 2018 was a banner year for President Trump. In early July, grand juries in Washington, D.C. handed out indictments to 12 or 13, over a dozen Russian intelligence service officers because they meddled in the 2016 election. 3 days later, President Trump stood on foreign soil in Helsinki, Finland, right beside Vladimir Putin after a secret meeting with no interpreters and no notes, and said, I believe Vladimir Putin because he said he didn't have anything to do with it. That was the final straw, obviously, for me. Threw all 17 of our intelligence services overboard. So what happened? We lost dollars of agricultural trade. I'm back to tariffs and so forth. We lost dollars of agricultural trade, and that resonates out through rural communities. Because of this, I'm a farmer, and trust me, anything we make, and by the way, just a little bit of a side, almost 50%, about 47% of all the soybeans grown in the United States are shipped overseas. Okay? What's the best way to get dollars into your rural communities? Richland County is a rural community. There's a lot of farms here and the surrounding counties. What's the best way to get dollars into rural communities? It's through foreign trade. It's to extract those dollars, run them through farmers like myself, and then out to, and I'll tell you why, farmers don't sit on their money. I spend it all. The tire store, the used truck store, the new truck store, Walmart, the grocery store, the service store, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever, all of these stores here lying around Main Street, we spend our money and we allocate it out. We lost that ability in 2018. So fast forward. This is deja vu all over again. Now we're into 2025, and we are in exactly the same spot we were in 2018 with the threat of tariffs on all of our traditional trading partners, all of our traditional allies, but this time it's much more sinister. Much more sinister. Trump isn't just trying to prove something. He is trying to create a sphere of influence. He wants to become the Don Corleone of the West. This is why he respects President Xi from China. This is because Xi has a sphere of influence in Asia. This is why he respects, he says, Putin in Russia, because he has a sphere of influence. This is why he respects Viktor Orban from Hungary, because he has a sphere of influence. Trump wants his own sphere of influence. And so he applies punitive tariffs, he applies pain, he applies hush money, protection money to these countries, all of our friends. And that's what's happening today. And you know what? None other than George W. Bush predicted this. In 2011, George W. Bush said this. He said, there's three things that America needs to be on the lookout for. Three isms, he called them. And you can just hear George Bush saying this. The same guy that talked about strategery. Three isms that he worried about. Protectionism, nativism, and isolationism. Protectionism means trying to apply tariffs and pain to all of our foreign countries. Nativism is where in the 1920s we thought we would turn inward and say, we don't care what happens in Europe. They're just all the way over there. We'll just take care of ourselves. By the time 1939 came, how did that work out? George Bush warned about that. And finally, isolationism. We're seeing that today with the veracity against our immigrant community. Okay? He warned against that. This is where we are at. And this is what we have to fight against. Protectionism, nativism, and isolationism. All of those things. I'll bring it back to rural America. Who in the hell do you think is going to pick your tomatoes? Who Who do you think is going to pick your strawberries? Who do you think is going to pick your blueberries? Who's going to pick your cabbage? Who's going to do that? I'm going to tell you something, and I don't care if I get in trouble. It's not going to be some white boy coming home in a Ford 150 after basketball practice. They're not going to do it. We need these folks. We need immigration, and we need comprehensive immigration reform. On Ukraine, and I'll wrap it up here in just a second. On Ukraine, another example of Trump trying to extract pain, trying to extract protection money out of Ukraine without protection. He'll take your minerals with no guarantee of protection. That's not a good deal for Don Corleone. Actually, it's probably a good deal for him, but it's certainly not for the Ukrainian people, it's not for Eastern Europe, and it's not for the United States at all. So I'm going to leave you with this. Number one, thank you for being out here. Thank you. Remember, it's not just your right to participate in civil disobedience, it is your obligation to do that. I'm a Broadway guy. I like Broadway shows. Hey, how you doing, buddy? Woo! You know what? All the drunk people should never worry about the price of fuel because they got plenty. They got plenty right there. Good for him. I'm a Broadway guy. Have anybody ever seen Ragtime? Ragtime? One of the lines in Ragtime is where I'm going to leave you. Go out and tell our story. Make it echo far and wide. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Say it with me. Go out and tell your story. Let it echo far and wide. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Thank you.